The night is calm, and as you close your eyes, let your mind travel far away from the concerns of the present moment. Breathe slowly, letting the air drift in and out of your lungs, carrying away tension with every exhale. Tonight, we will journey together into one of the most enchanting and mysterious wonders of the ancient world, a story that drifts between history and myth, fact and imagination. It is the story of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a place whispered about for centuries, where cascading terraces of green trees and fragrant flowers are said to have risen from the heart of the desert. A dream made of stone, water, and living plants, it has become one of humanity's most enduring legends. The Hanging Gardens are often listed among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, yet they are unlike the others. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt, whose immense stones stand unmoved by time, or the lighthouse of Alexandria, which once guided ships across the sea, the Hanging Gardens remain veiled in mystery. No ruins have been definitively identified, and no photographs could ever capture them, for they may have been lost long before the world learned to preserve its wonders. What remains are descriptions, memories passed down, and the endless human desire to imagine a paradise built by hand. And tonight, through this story, we will gently wander through that imagined world. As you settle into your place of rest, allow yourself to feel as if you are being transported. Picture the desert air cooling after the heat of day. Imagine a distant horizon, where the sun has dipped below the edge of the earth, leaving a golden glow that slowly fades into deep blue twilight. Somewhere in that land of shifting sands and ancient rivers, there once stood a city called Babylon, a place of majesty and legend. And within its walls, people believed there was a garden unlike any other, a garden where waterfalls trickled from terraces high above the ground, where palm trees rose skyward, and where flowers from far-off lands released their fragrances into the evening air. The story of the Hanging Gardens is more than just the tale of a building or a landscape. It is a story about longing, about love, about power, and about the human drive to create beauty in even the harshest of places. Some say it was built by a king for his queen, to ease her homesickness and remind her of the lush green hills of her childhood. Others say it was constructed as a symbol of divine favor, a way of bringing heaven closer to earth. And still others suggest it may never have existed at all, that it was a legend born in the minds of travelers who told stories that grew larger and more wondrous with every retelling. But tonight, we do not need to separate history from legend. Instead, we will weave them together, allowing the tale to wash over us like a lullaby from the past. We will move slowly, step by step, through the lands and stories that gave birth to the legend of the Hanging Gardens. There will be no rush, no urgency. Time will seem to stretch out, unhurried and unbroken, like the calm waters of a river flowing gently across the desert plain. In this journey, you will hear of ancient kings and queens, of vast empires and the wonders they dreamed into being. You will imagine walking through the streets of Babylon, hearing the murmur of voices and the rustle of trade goods from far-off lands. You will ascend stone stairways that lead to terraces filled with greenery, resting beneath branches that sway softly in the breeze. You will hear the flow of water, carried up from the river below, spilling over the edges in silver streams that shimmer in the sunlight or glisten under the glow of the moon. This is not a story that demands you to remember every detail. It is a story designed to help you let go. You may drift in and out of focus, letting your thoughts wander as you listen. The words will continue, like a gentle current, carrying you along whether you follow closely or allow yourself to float freely on the surface of imagination. In this way, the Hanging Gardens will become not only a wonder of the ancient world, but also a sanctuary for your mind tonight, a safe, quiet place where you can rest. So breathe slowly. Feel the weight of the day begin to lift from your shoulders. Let the steady rhythm of this tale draw you inward, toward a place of stillness. In a moment, we will step into the world of ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, where rivers carved life into the desert and great cities rose from the sands. But before we begin that journey, simply rest here, on the threshold of the story. The Hanging Gardens are waiting, suspended between myth and history, between dream and memory. And soon, we will walk among them together.
Long before the Hanging Gardens were ever imagined, long before Babylon itself rose in splendor, there was a land between 2 rivers. This land is known to history as Mesopotamia, a word that simply means the land between the rivers. The two rivers, mighty and timeless, were the Tigris and the Euphrates. They cut through the dry, golden earth of the Middle East, carrying water from distant mountains into a wide, fertile valley. It was in this place, nourished by the river's gift of life, that human civilization itself began to take root. As you picture this ancient world, allow yourself to imagine the slow rhythm of flowing water. The rivers were the heartbeat of Mesopotamia, steady and unending. They flooded with the seasons, bringing both destruction and renewal. When they spilled over their banks, they left behind a rich, dark soil, perfect for growing wheat and barley. In a world where most land was dry and barren, this gift of fertile soil was nothing less than miraculous. And so, people settled here, thousands of years ago, to farm, to build villages, and to begin the long story of human history. The cradle of civilization, this is what Mesopotamia is often called. It was here that writing was invented, in the form of tiny wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay tablets. It was here that the first laws were written, that kings built palaces, and that priests raised great ziggurats, step temples that reached up toward the heavens. The people of this land lived close to the earth and the rivers, guided by the cycles of the sun and stars. Yet at the same time, they dreamed of eternity, of pleasing the gods, of creating monuments that would outlast their lives. Imagine yourself standing on the banks of one of these rivers, thousands of years ago. The morning sun has just risen, casting a golden glow over the land. Farmers are at work, bending low over fields of grain that ripple in the breeze like waves on the sea. Oxen pull wooden plows, their hooves pressing deep into the rich soil. Nearby, a fisherman casts his net into the water, waiting patiently for it to fill. Children run barefoot along the riverbank, their laughter mingling with the calls of waterbirds that rise into the sky. It is a world both humble and extraordinary, where daily life is simple, yet shaped by forces greater than anyone can control. Over time, villages became towns, and towns became cities. Walls were built to protect against enemies. Canals were dug to carry water farther inland. Great temples rose, made of mud brick and decorated with colorful tiles that glistened in the sun. And above all, stories grew, stories of gods and goddesses who ruled over the skies, the earth, and the waters. In Mesopotamia, people believed that their lives were bound tightly to the will of the divine. The rivers themselves were thought to be sacred, both a blessing and a danger, gifts from the gods that could also bring destruction when their waters raged too high. Mesopotamia was not one kingdom, but many. Over the centuries, powerful city-states rose and fell. In Sumer, in the south, people told stories of Gilgamesh, the legendary king who sought eternal life. In Akkad, rulers dreamed of empire, sending armies far and wide. In Assyria, warriors built fearsome armies and carved their victories into stone reliefs. And in Babylon, one of the most famous of all Mesopotamian cities, art, science, and architecture reached new heights. It was this Babylon, cradled by the Euphrates, that would one day be the setting for the Hanging Gardens. The land itself shaped the people who lived there. The summers were long and hot, with blazing sun that scorched the earth. The winters could be cold, with winds sweeping across the plains. Sandstorms sometimes rose, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. And yet, between the rivers, there was always the promise of water, the promise of life. It was a place of contrasts, harsh and unforgiving at times, yet capable of supporting some of the richest cultures the ancient world had ever seen. When the stars came out at night, the skies above Mesopotamia were wide and endless. Without the glow of modern cities, the heavens would have been brilliant, filled with constellations that seemed close enough to touch. Ancient astronomers in this land charted the movements of the planets, mapped the phases of the moon, and predicted eclipses. They looked upward to the sky for guidance, believing the gods sent messages through the stars. In the quiet of night, the people of Mesopotamia dreamed beneath those skies, the same way we dream beneath them now, thousands of years later. As you let your mind wander, think of Mesopotamia as both a beginning and a mystery. It is a beginning because so many of the things we now take for granted, writing, laws, cities, agriculture, were first nurtured in this land. And it is a mystery because so much of it has faded into the dust of time. The ruins of ancient cities lie buried beneath layers of earth. The temples have crumbled, and the voices of the people who once prayed there are silent. Yet through their stories, their inventions, and their dreams, they still speak to us across the centuries. To understand the Hanging Gardens, we must first understand this world, a land shaped by rivers, by gods, and by human ambition. It was in this setting that Babylon rose, a city of power and wonder, a city that would capture the imagination of the world. And so, as we drift further into this story, we leave behind the broad landscapes of Mesopotamia and move toward the shining city at its heart. Babylon awaits us, with its walls and temples, its palaces and marketplaces, and, if legend is to be believed, its great hanging garden of paradise.
Babylon, the very name has echoed across the centuries like a whisper from the ancient world. When people spoke of greatness in the time of empires, they often spoke of Babylon. Rising from the fertile banks of the Euphrates River, the city was a jewel of Mesopotamia, dazzling in both its scale and its splendor. To imagine Babylon is to imagine one of the grandest cities ever built in antiquity, a place of soaring walls, magnificent gates, and palaces fit for kings. Tonight, as we continue our story, let us walk slowly through its streets in our minds, seeing it not with the eyes of an archaeologist, but with the eyes of a dreamer. Babylon was surrounded by walls so vast and tall that ancient writers marveled at them. Some claimed the walls were wide enough for chariots to race across their tops. Whether these accounts are exaggerated or not, they tell us something important. Babylon inspired awe. Its defenses were more than mere stone barriers. They were symbols of strength, power, and permanence. To approach the city was to feel dwarfed, to feel small in the face of human ambition realized in brick and mortar. And yet, behind those walls, life pulsed with vibrancy, with color, with sound. One of the most famous landmarks of Babylon was the Ishtar Gate, a monumental entrance built with deep blue glazed bricks that seemed to shimmer like the night sky. Across its surface were golden images of lions, bulls, and dragons, sacred animals tied to the city's gods. Imagine approaching this gate as a traveler, the sun gleaming off the polished tiles, the figures seeming almost alive as you drew closer. To pass through the Ishtar Gate was not just to enter a city, it was to step into a realm of wonder, a place where art and devotion blended seamlessly into architecture. Beyond the gate stretched the processional way, a grand boulevard that cut through the heart of Babylon. Lined with more decorated walls, it served as the path for religious ceremonies, where statues of the gods were carried in magnificent processions. The street would have been alive with people, priests in ornate garments, musicians playing ancient instruments, ordinary citizens pressing forward to glimpse the divine images. Yet even in the bustle, one can imagine a sense of reverence, of belonging to something greater than oneself. At the city's center rose the great ziggurat, often associated with the legendary Tower of Babel. This stepped pyramid soared toward the heavens, each level rising higher, bringing worshippers closer to the sky. Built of mud brick, it was both a place of ritual and a symbol of humanity's longing to touch the divine. To climb its steps was to rise above the city, to look out across the rooftops, the winding streets, and the river that brought life to it all. In the soft light of dawn or the golden glow of sunset, the ziggurat would have seemed otherworldly, a stairway between earth and heaven. Life in Babylon was not only about temples and palaces, it was also about people. The markets bustled with energy, filled with merchants selling spices, grains, cloth, and pottery. The air would have carried the mingling scents of baked bread, burning incense, and fragrant oils. Voices overlapped in many tongues, for Babylon was a crossroads of cultures, a place where travelers from distant lands came to trade. By day, the city was alive with commerce. By night, it was alive with stories, songs, and the flicker of oil lamps. Babylon was also a city of learning. Astronomers watched the stars from its rooftops, carefully recording their patterns. Scribes pressed cuneiform signs into clay tablets, preserving laws, myths, and calculations. Scholars debated matters of law, medicine, and mathematics, all within the city's walls. In this way, Babylon was more than a center of power, it was a center of knowledge, a place where wisdom was sought and cherished. And yet, Babylon was also a city of contrasts. Grandeur and luxury were present for the wealthy, while the poor worked hard in the shadows of the great monuments. The Euphrates, flowing through the city, provided water for drinking, farming, and transport, but it could also flood, threatening destruction. The same walls that protected the city also kept people contained within its ordered structure. Babylon was not paradise. It was a human city, filled with complexity, with triumph and struggle side by side. But to the outside world, to those who heard its name in stories carried along caravan routes, Babylon was magnificent beyond imagination. Its gates, its temples, its markets, and its mysteries became legendary. It stood as a testament to what human beings could build when they dared to dream on the grandest scale. And within this city, cradled by walls of stone and towers that reached for the sky, there was said to be a garden like no other, a garden that would one day be counted among the wonders of the world. As you rest and let your thoughts drift, picture Babylon not as a ruin, as it is today, but as it might have been in its prime. Imagine the glow of the sun on golden bricks, the murmur of the river passing beneath bridges, the songs of worship echoing through temple courtyards. Imagine walking its streets, your footsteps blending with countless others, the air filled with the life of a city at the height of its glory. And beyond those streets, perhaps hidden behind palace walls, perhaps rising above the rooftops, was the fabled Hanging Gardens, our next destination on this journey through time. Nebuchadnezzar II. His name alone carries the weight of ancient history, spoken in the echoes of stone inscriptions and remembered in the pages of old chronicles. To understand the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, we must understand the man to whom they are most often attributed. Nebuchadnezzar II was no ordinary ruler. He was a king of vision, of ambition, and of immense power. His reign marked the height of Babylon's greatness, the period when the city became a shining symbol of empire, wealth, and wonder. Nebuchadnezzar ruled in the 6th century before the Common Era, a time when empires rose and fell across the Near East. He inherited the throne from his father, Nabopolassar, who had established the Neo-Babylonian Empire after overthrowing the Assyrian rule. Nebuchadnezzar did not simply preserve this inheritance, he expanded it. He waged campaigns across lands stretching from the deserts of Arabia to the mountains of Anatolia, bringing more territory under Babylon's control. He was a warrior as well as a builder, a king who commanded armies but also one who dreamed of monuments that would endure beyond his lifetime. The king is perhaps best remembered in the biblical tradition for the conquest of Jerusalem. In those stories, Nebuchadnezzar appears as a figure of both fear and destiny, leading armies that toppled the city's walls and carried its people into exile. To the Hebrews, he was both an instrument of punishment and a symbol of the might of Babylon. But within Babylon itself, he was celebrated as a restorer of glory, a man who poured wealth and labor into transforming his capital into the greatest city on earth. It was during his long reign, over 4 decades, that the city of Babylon was remade. The Ishtar Gate, with its gleaming blue bricks, was his creation. The processional way, stretching proudly through the city, was laid down under his command. The great temples, restored and enlarged, were decorated in his honor. And above all, the city walls, so massive that ancient authors claimed they were one of the marvels of the world, were constructed to defend and to impress. Yet for all his achievements in war and architecture, Nebuchadnezzar is most closely linked to a story of tenderness. According to legend, it was not merely pride or ambition that drove him to build the Hanging Gardens. It was love. His queen, Amytes of Media, came from a land of rolling green hills and mountain forests. When she came to Babylon, she found herself surrounded by flat plains and dry, sun-baked earth. The desert stretched endlessly around her, and she longed for the lush beauty of her homeland. To ease her sadness, Nebuchadnezzar ordered a garden to be built, an extraordinary, elevated garden that would rise like a mountain in the middle of the city. Imagine the devotion behind such a gesture. A king, ruler of one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world, creating a wonder not for military glory or divine favor, but to bring comfort to his beloved. Whether this tale is entirely true or embroidered with time, it has become inseparable from the legend of the Hanging Gardens. It transforms Nebuchadnezzar from a figure of conquest into a man who understood the power of beauty and the importance of memory. But love and sentiment were only one side of his reign. Nebuchadnezzar was also a deeply religious king. He honored the gods of Babylon with offerings, building and restoring temples dedicated to Marduk, the chief deity, and to Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. The gardens themselves, if they truly existed, may have been seen not just as a gift to a queen, but as a sacred act, a creation of paradise on earth, a mirror of the divine order. In Mesopotamian belief, gardens were more than pleasant spaces. They were symbols of fertility, abundance, and the favor of the gods. For Nebuchadnezzar, the gardens could have been both a personal gift and a cosmic offering. When we think of Nebuchadnezzar, it is easy to picture a stern figure in royal robes, seated on a throne of carved wood and stone, surrounded by advisors and guards. But in the quiet of night, one might imagine him differently. Perhaps, after the day's duties were done, he walked among the terraces of his garden, listening to the sound of water trickling from one level to the next. Perhaps he watched the stars above Babylon and thought of the long future he hoped his city would have. Perhaps he saw in the eyes of his queen the happiness that the gardens had brought her, and felt, for a moment, that his power had achieved something truly lasting. History remembers Nebuchadnezzar as a conqueror, a builder, and a king who ruled with a firm hand. But within the soft, flowing story of the Hanging Gardens, we can remember him also as a dreamer, a man who sought to create a paradise of stone and soil, of water and greenery. In him, we see the balance of strength and sensitivity, ambition and affection. And in his reign, we find the foundation upon which the legend of the gardens was built. As we drift deeper into this tale, think of Nebuchadnezzar not as a distant, unreachable figure of the past, but as a human being, complex, driven, and filled with the same desires that have guided people across all time. He longed for glory, he longed for legacy, and perhaps most of all, he longed to bring joy to those he loved. In the heart of his great city, he may have created a vision of paradise that would echo through history, a vision we continue to explore even now. The story of the Hanging Gardens is often told as a tale of love, an intimate, human reason for one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world. At the center of this story is a queen, Amytes of Media, the wife of King Nebuchadnezzar II. While history gives us only fragments of her life, legend has given her a voice of longing, a yearning that inspired a king to reshape the very earth and sky. Amytes was said to have come from Media, a land of rolling hills, forests, and cool mountain air. Her homeland was green, dotted with meadows and rivers, a place where nature thrived in abundance. When she came to Babylon, however, she entered a very different world. Babylon was grand, majestic, and filled with riches, but it was also a city built on flat plains, surrounded by deserts that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The heat of the sun baked the land. The earth, dry and golden, contrasted sharply with the cool greens she had once known. For a queen used to the sight of trees swaying in the breeze and hillsides alive with wildflowers, Babylon must have felt, at times, lonely and unfamiliar. In the quiet of the palace, perhaps Amytes looked out from her windows and saw only dust and stone, the flatness of the plain, and the shimmering heat rising from the earth. She may have remembered the scent of pine trees, the sound of streams rushing down mountain slopes, the feeling of damp grass beneath her feet. Nostalgia can be powerful, and in her longing for home, she found herself dreaming of a place where those memories could live again. Nebuchadnezzar, it is said, saw this sorrow in his queen. He, who had built walls strong enough to defend his empire and gates beautiful enough to awe the world, decided he would build something else, something far more personal. He would bring the hills of Media into the heart of Babylon. He would raise terraces of stone, fill them with soil, and plant them with trees and flowers from faraway lands. He would create a mountain of gardens, a living memory of his queen's homeland, so that she would never feel far from the world she loved. The legend of this gesture has survived for centuries because it speaks to something deeply human. At its heart, it is not just about power or glory, but about empathy, about listening to the unspoken wishes of another. The Hanging Gardens, if they truly were born of Amytes's longing, represent not only one of the greatest feats of engineering in antiquity, but also one of the greatest expressions of devotion. A king, with the resources of an empire at his command, chose to use them to ease the heartache of the woman he loved. Picture this act through the eyes of the queen herself. One morning, she might have stepped into the courtyard of the palace and seen the first terraces rising before her. At first, perhaps only bare stone and scaffolding. Then, slowly, greenery appeared. Saplings took root, vines stretched upward, and blossoms opened to the sun. Water flowed down channels carved into the stone, trickling into pools where lilies floated. The air grew cooler, shaded by leaves, and filled with the fragrance of jasmine and roses. Imagine her wonder as the barren desert city transformed into a place where she could walk among familiar scents and colors, as though stepping into a dream of her homeland. To the people of Babylon, this creation must have seemed extraordinary as well. A mountain made not of rock but of life, where gardens climbed into the sky. For them, it would have been more than a queen's private sanctuary. It was a sign of the king's greatness, his ability to bend nature itself to his will. Yet to Ametes, it may have been something simpler, a refuge of peace, a place to rest her heart. This origin story of the gardens is romantic, almost poetic, and that is why it has endured. Historians may debate whether the tale is true, whether Ametes ever truly lived in Babylon, or whether Nebuchadnezzar ever built such gardens at all. But for our purposes tonight, the distinction between fact and legend matters little. What matters is the image it leaves behind: a woman, far from home, longing for green hills, and a king, powerful enough to change the world, choosing to build a wonder to answer her longing. Stories like these remind us that behind the grandeur of ancient monuments there are often very human emotions. Empires rise and fall, kings wage wars and build temples, but at the heart of it all are people, people who love, who miss home, who seek comfort, and who dream. The Hanging Gardens may be remembered as a wonder of architecture and engineering, but their true wonder lies in this: they carry the memory of a single human heart, longing for the beauty of nature, and the answer of another heart, willing to make that longing real. As you rest and let your thoughts drift, imagine yourself standing beside Ametes in those early days of the gardens. The sun sets over Babylon, casting long golden shadows across the walls. The terraces rise before you, alive with green, each level higher than the one below. You hear the gentle splash of water falling from tier to tier. You breathe in the fragrance of flowers carried on the evening breeze. And in that moment, like Ametes, you feel a sense of peace, as if a piece of paradise has been placed in the midst of the desert just for you.
In the ancient world, the idea of paradise was not simply a place of comfort, but a vision of harmony between human life and the natural world. To understand the true wonder of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one must imagine how they appeared against the backdrop of the desert. Babylon itself rose from a flat, sun-baked land. The wide plains of Mesopotamia stretched endlessly in every direction, marked by rivers and canals, but often dry, harsh, and unforgiving. For travelers approaching the city, the heat shimmered on the horizon, and dust hung in the air. To see a green mountain rising in the midst of this dry world must have felt like glimpsing a dream brought to life. The Hanging Gardens, as imagined by ancient writers, were not simply plants growing in soil. They were an engineered vision of abundance, a constructed paradise that defied the natural order of the desert. In a place where water was scarce, here it flowed freely, falling from terrace to terrace. In a place where shade was rare, here groves of trees stretched their branches to the sky. Flowers of every color spilled over the edges of walls, vines cascaded downward, and fragrant herbs perfumed the air. It was not only a garden, but a vision of life flourishing in defiance of the surrounding wilderness. For the Babylonians, and for all who heard of the gardens, this creation echoed ancient myths of a perfect garden at the dawn of time. Mesopotamian culture often spoke of sacred groves, places where humans and gods might walk together. To some, the Hanging Gardens may have seemed like a recreation of those myths, a living echo of Eden-like spaces described in their traditions. They were, in essence, a symbol of hope, the idea that humankind could bring balance and beauty to even the harshest land. Imagine walking through the great gates of Babylon, leaving behind the heat and dust of the plains. The streets of the city are wide, lined with clay brick walls, and crowded with people. The sound of merchants calling out, of animals moving through the streets, fills your ears. Then, suddenly, your eyes lift upward, and you see them, a rising series of terraces, covered in green. Against the backdrop of the golden desert city, the sight is astonishing. The higher you look, the more layers you see, until the structure seems to reach the sky itself. The air around you feels cooler, moister, as though a fragment of another world has been planted here in the desert. The vision of paradise in the Hanging Gardens was not just about beauty, it was about contrast. The gardens represented life against death, green against gold, water against dust. They reminded those who saw them that even in the most unforgiving conditions, abundance was possible. For the queen who longed for her homeland, the gardens were a balm to the heart. For the people of Babylon, they were a source of pride. For visitors from far-off lands, they were a marvel that seemed to exist outside the ordinary rules of the world. The gardens were also a spiritual vision. In Mesopotamian thought, water was sacred. The rivers Tigris and Euphrates were the lifeblood of the land, gifts of the gods. To see water lifted high into the air, flowing through channels and pouring into pools, must have seemed miraculous. It suggested mastery over nature, but also harmony with it, a recognition that life could be nurtured, shaped, and sustained through human effort and divine favor. For those resting in the gardens, the experience must have been otherworldly. The air would have been cool and damp, a rare comfort in the heat of Babylon. Birds would have nested in the trees, their songs mingling with the gentle rush of water. Bees might have moved from flower to flower, carrying the promise of honey. The earth beneath your feet would have been soft, the paths shaded by leaves, the air filled with scents both familiar and exotic. Here, in the midst of the desert, the world felt transformed, an oasis made permanent, a paradise built not by chance, but by design. This contrast, the harsh desert outside, the living paradise within, made the Hanging Gardens one of the greatest wonders. They were not simply an achievement of architecture, but of imagination. To build them required not only stone and soil, but also vision, the ability to see, in the mind's eye, a place where longing could be answered, where home could be recreated, where the impossible could be made real. As you rest now, imagine yourself entering such a place. The noise of the city fades behind you, replaced by the soft trickle of water. The heat of the sun no longer burns your skin, for a canopy of leaves shields you. The air, heavy with the perfume of blossoms, invites you to breathe deeply and let go. You walk slowly, step by step, along shaded paths, your hand brushing against the cool stone walls draped with vines. The desert may be only a few steps away, but here, in this garden, you are in another world. A place of peace, of balance, of abundance. And that was the vision that the Hanging Gardens gave to the ancient world, a vision of paradise in the desert, a dream made solid, a wonder that whispered of love, devotion, and the timeless human desire to shape the world into something beautiful.
When we speak of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, it is easy to focus only on their beauty, the flowers, the trees, the sense of paradise in the desert. Yet another layer of wonder rests not in what they looked like, but in how they could possibly have been made. To imagine a structure so immense, rising with terraces of stone, carrying soil, trees, and flowing water in the heart of an arid land, is to confront the ingenuity and daring of the ancient world. For many who heard of the gardens, the very act of building them seemed like a miracle, something that defied the limits of human skill. Ancient writers described the gardens as a great series of stone terraces, each level rising above the other like steps reaching toward the sky. Some accounts suggest that the gardens stood as high as 75 feet, though others imagine them even taller. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer weight of soil and water held aloft at such heights. The trees, with their spreading roots, would have required not just planting beds, but deep layers of earth. The terraces, then, had to be more than simple platforms. They had to be massive, reinforced structures capable of holding the weight of a mountain built by human hands. How could this be done in the 6th century BCE? Scholars believe the answer lies in the creativity of Babylonian builders. One theory suggests that the terraces were constructed with layers of stone and brick, bound together with bitumen, a natural tar that the Mesopotamians used as mortar and waterproofing. Upon this base, reeds, mats, and thick layers of soil may have been laid, creating a foundation strong enough to hold trees and gardens. Some even believe that the Babylonians invented a form of vaulted architecture, with arches supporting the weight above. In this way, the terraces could be both immense and hollow, a network of chambers that carried the burden of paradise. But building the terraces was only the first challenge. The greater question was water. Babylon lay on the flat plains of Mesopotamia, and while the Euphrates River flowed through the city, lifting water from the river to the heights of the gardens required both strength and invention. Some ancient sources suggest that the Babylonians used a chain pump or a spiral screw, devices in which a continuous loop of buckets or a twisting mechanism lifted water upward. Workers would have turned the machinery day and night, raising streams of water from the river below into hidden channels and reservoirs at the top of the structure. From there, the water would cascade downward, trickling through channels to nourish each terrace, keeping the soil damp and the trees alive. This system, if it truly existed, would have been centuries ahead of its time. The spiral screw, often attributed to the Greek thinker Archimedes, may in fact have had its origins here, in Babylon, used to keep a queen's memory of home alive. To picture this mechanism turning, lifting water in an endless rhythm, is to glimpse the marriage of necessity and imagination that defines human invention. Now, close your eyes and imagine the gardens not just as a place of beauty, but as a living machine. Beneath the shade of the trees, hidden from sight, workers move quietly, tending the pumps, guiding the flow of water through channels cut into stone. The sound of trickling water is not only the music of nature, but also the heartbeat of a carefully designed system. The terraces above your head rest on layers of brick and reed, carefully placed, each one carrying a weight of soil and life. The very ground beneath your feet is not natural earth, but a structure shaped by human hands, designed to imitate the slopes of a mountain. For the people of Babylon, this would have been as awe-inspiring as the sight of the gardens themselves. In an age when most cities were built from sun-dried brick and timber, to see such a creation rise into the sky was proof of what human determination could achieve. It was not simply a work of beauty, but also a declaration of power. The king who commanded such a feat showed the world that even nature itself could be reshaped by his will. Of course, we must remember that much of this remains uncertain. No ruins of the Hanging Gardens have ever been found. No definitive record of their construction survives. What we know comes from stories told centuries after the time of Nebuchadnezzar, from historians in Greece and Rome who wrote of wonders they had heard whispered across the lands. Were the gardens truly built as these accounts describe, or are they the product of imagination? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, a structure less vast, less perfect, but still remarkable enough to give rise to legends. Yet even in uncertainty, the story of their construction teaches us something. Whether the terraces stood exactly as described or whether they were exaggerated in the telling, the very idea that ancient people could envision such a structure reveals the depth of their creativity. To imagine lifting water against gravity, to build terraces capable of holding a forest above the city, is to think beyond the ordinary, to stretch the boundaries of possibility. As you drift deeper into rest, picture the gardens not only as a place of shade and flowers, but as a miracle of design. See the wide terraces layered above one another, built of brick and stone. See the channels of water glistening in the sunlight as they carry life to the roots of trees. Hear the quiet creak of wooden mechanisms turning, lifting water upward, an eternal rhythm that sustains the paradise above. In this vision, beauty and engineering become one, and the impossible becomes real. The Hanging Gardens remind us that even in the ancient world, long before modern machines or technology, human beings dreamed boldly. They did not accept the limits of their environment, they reshaped it. They built mountains where none existed, rivers where the land was dry, forests where there was only dust. And though the physical gardens may have vanished, the dream of their construction endures, inspiring us to believe that with imagination and care, even the impossible can be achieved. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine stepping into the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, not as a distant observer, but as a guest invited to walk within them. You pass through the bustling streets of the city, leaving behind the noise of merchants, the heat of the sun, and the smell of clay dust rising from the ground. Ahead of you, the terraces begin to rise, layer upon layer, like the steps of a green mountain built by human hands. From a distance, it appears as if the earth itself has lifted upward, crowned with trees and flowers. Now, with slow and careful steps, you approach. At the base of the gardens, the air already feels different. The desert heat is softened by shade, and the sound of water trickles faintly around you. A faint breeze carries the fragrance of flowers, sweet, fresh, unfamiliar. You notice vines spilling down the walls, their leaves catching the light, their blossoms like stars against the stone. The first terrace rises above you, its steps broad and welcoming, as though inviting you to climb upward into another world. You place your hand on the warm stone, and then you begin to ascend. Each step takes you higher, but with each level, the city below seems farther away, the noise and dust fading. At the first terrace, the air is cooler, the ground beneath your feet softened by soil rather than baked clay. Here, small flowering shrubs line the paths, their petals opening wide to the sun. Bees hum gently as they move from bloom to bloom, and a shallow pool of water reflects the sky like a polished mirror. The sound of trickling water grows clearer now, as streams are guided through carved channels that edge the walkways. You pause for a moment and listen. The steady murmur of water is joined by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The sound is not loud, not overwhelming, but gentle, like a lullaby whispered by nature itself. You breathe in deeply. The air smells of roses, herbs, and damp earth. For a moment, you could forget you are in the heart of Babylon at all. Moving upward again, you reach the second terrace. Here the plants grow taller, and the shade deeper. Olive trees spread their silvery leaves overhead, their branches offering a cool canopy. The light of the sun filters through them, dappled and soft, as though you are walking in a grove. Perhaps a fig tree grows nearby, its heavy fruit dangling, ripening in the warmth. Small birds flit between branches, their calls sharp yet melodic. They seem to have made their home here, as though the gardens belong as much to them as to the people who visit. You follow the path as it curves, leading to a small stone bench shaded by vines. The vines climb the walls, weaving themselves upward, their blossoms spilling in cascades of color, reds, yellows, and whites. Sitting for a moment, you feel the coolness of stone beneath you, and the air brushing lightly across your skin. The water channels glimmer in the sunlight, guiding streams across the terrace before allowing them to fall to the levels below. You close your eyes, listening again, the sound of water mingling with the faint call of birds. Now, with slow steps, you rise and continue upward. The third terrace opens like a meadow in the sky. Here, grasses sway softly, their tips catching the light, while clusters of wildflowers scatter across the ground in a carpet of color. You kneel briefly and run your fingers through the blades of grass. They bend easily, damp with dew, as though you had stepped not into a city structure but into a field brought to life far above the ground. The breeze here carries a different scent, perhaps of lavender or thyme, herbs planted for their fragrance, their healing properties, or simply for their beauty. Further on, you reach a grove of larger trees. Perhaps cedars or date palms stretch high, their trunks tall and slender, their leaves whispering in the wind. Walking among them, you feel the cool shade they provide, a rare comfort in this land of heat and dryness. The sound of flowing water grows stronger still. You can hear it now, spilling from a higher terrace above, cascading like a silver ribbon in the sunlight. You stop to watch it, droplets scattering into the air, catching the sun like fragments of crystal. The sound soothes your mind, steady and calm, as though the gardens themselves are breathing in rhythm with you. Step by step, you climb higher still. Each terrace holds a new vision, a new blend of plants, water, and air. The further you go, the quieter the city seems, until its sounds are no more than a faint murmur carried on the breeze. The hanging gardens are not only a place of beauty but also a sanctuary, a world apart from the streets below. Here, time seems slower. The paths invite you to wander, to pause, to listen. Finally, you reach the uppermost terrace. From here, you can see the vast plains stretching outward, the Euphrates River winding its way like a silver thread through the golden land. The desert, wide and harsh, lies beyond, but within the terraces you stand surrounded by life, green branches swaying, blossoms trembling, water glistening as it runs beside your feet. You lean against the stone balustrade, your hands resting on its cool surface, and you gaze outward. The contrast is breathtaking. Below you, the city of Babylon, busy and powerful. Beyond, the endless desert, and here, where you stand, a paradise lifted toward the sky. As you take in this vision, you understand why these gardens were remembered for centuries. They were not only a triumph of engineering and devotion, they were a dream, a sanctuary, a vision of paradise given form. And now, as you rest in this imagined walk, let the image linger, the flowers nodding gently in the breeze, the cool touch of shade, the ever-present sound of water. A place both real and mythical, a place where the desert was transformed into beauty. Water has always been the lifeblood of civilization, and in Mesopotamia, this truth was felt more deeply than perhaps anywhere else on earth. The land between the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, was the cradle of Babylonian life. Without the steady gift of these waters, there would have been no city, no empire, no gardens. To imagine the Hanging Gardens, we must first imagine the role of water in Babylon itself, sacred, essential, and endlessly powerful. In the heat of Mesopotamia, water was more than refreshment. It was survival. The summers were long and scorching, the plains dry, the sun unrelenting. The Euphrates River, flowing directly through Babylon, was the source that sustained the people, the fields, and the animals. Through canals and irrigation systems, the Babylonians drew the river's bounty into their fields, coaxing life from the dry earth. Wheat and barley, dates and figs, all depended on the careful guidance of water. Without it, the desert would have claimed everything. Now, imagine this precious resource not simply feeding crops on the plains, but lifted high into the air to nourish gardens that climbed into the sky. This was the genius and the wonder of the Hanging Gardens. To raise water upward, against gravity, was no small feat. Some ancient accounts describe water being drawn from the Euphrates by mechanical devices, endless chains of buckets, or screws turning in a steady rhythm. Workers may have labored quietly, day and night, keeping the flow constant. From there, the water was guided into channels that crisscrossed the terraces, seeping into the soil, feeding the roots of trees, and keeping the air cool and damp. The effect would have been extraordinary. In a city where most people knew water as something to be fetched, carried, and rationed carefully, the Hanging Gardens seemed to make it abundant, effortless, eternal. Imagine walking through the terraces and seeing streams winding beside you, spilling gently into shallow pools, flowing across the stone in rivulets. The sound would never cease, a soft murmur in the background, as if the gardens themselves were alive with breath. But water in Babylon was not only practical, it was spiritual. The rivers were thought to be gifts of the gods, sacred lifelines that connected heaven and earth. In myths, the primeval waters were the first substance of creation, the source from which the world was born. To manipulate water, to guide it into channels and lift it into the sky, was not simply an act of engineering. It was a sacred act, a reflection of divine order. The Hanging Gardens, with their flowing streams and trickling fountains, could be seen as a sacred landscape, a living symbol of the bond between people, gods, and the natural world. The Babylonians believed that the god Enki, or Ea, was lord of the waters, wisdom, and creation. In their temples, water played a role in purification, in rituals, and in the daily rhythm of worship. To see water flowing through the gardens, high above the city, may have carried with it a sense of blessing. It was not only the queen's homeland recreated in stone and soil, it was paradise, nourished by the sacred lifeblood of the rivers themselves. Consider too the sensory experience of water in such a place. Babylon was a city of heat and dust, its streets filled with the press of people, the bray of animals, the weight of the sun. To step into the gardens and hear the trickling of water, to feel its coolness on the air, to see droplets glisten on the leaves, it must have been deeply soothing, like stepping into another world. Visitors and residents alike would have found themselves slowing down, breathing more deeply, listening. In the gentle rhythm of water, the noise of life melted away, replaced by calm. The gardens thus became not only a marvel of beauty but also a sanctuary of sound and sensation. The flowing water was a lullaby, constant and comforting, a reminder that life, even in the heart of the desert, could be abundant. It carried the same message to queen and citizen alike: here, there is rest, here, there is peace. And yet, behind this tranquility lay the hidden labor of many. The raising of water required effort. Workers, unseen by the visitors wandering the shaded paths, kept the mechanisms in motion, lifting bucket after bucket, turning screw after screw. Their rhythm became part of the rhythm of the gardens. Their work was the invisible heartbeat that allowed the paradise above to flourish. In this way, water was both natural and human-made, a divine gift, but also the result of endless toil. If you listen closely, you might imagine hearing both, the natural murmur of streams, and the faint creak of wood and rope, the turning of ancient machines. Together, they created a harmony, the sound of nature and human ingenuity intertwined. As you rest now, Picture yourself pausing by one of the pools in the gardens. The water is clear, reflecting the leaves above. A breeze ripples its surface, sending patterns of light across the stone. You kneel and touch it, feeling its coolness against your skin. The sound of water surrounds you, falling, splashing, whispering. It soothes the mind, calming every thought. The desert lies just beyond the walls, but here life flows freely, endlessly. The hanging gardens, whether real or imagined, carry this eternal truth. Water is the breath of the earth, the lifeblood of creation, the essence of paradise. To see it lifted into the sky, made abundant where scarcity ruled, was to see a vision of what humanity could achieve with love, with devotion, and with unyielding imagination. The true wonder of the hanging gardens was not only in their terraces of stone or their ingenious systems of water, but in the life they held, the plants themselves. To picture the gardens is to picture a tapestry of colors, scents, and textures drawn from across distant lands. Babylon, at the height of its empire, stood at the crossroads of trade. Caravans carried goods across deserts, ships traveled rivers, and merchants brought treasures from faraway kingdoms. Among these treasures were plants, seeds, and saplings, collected and replanted within the terraces of the gardens. Imagine stepping into this place and being surrounded by a world of flora unlike any other in Mesopotamia. At the edges of the walkways, roses may have grown, their blossoms unfolding with layers of soft petals, their fragrance rich and sweet. Nearby, clusters of lilies could have opened, their white and gold flowers standing tall, delicate yet radiant under the sun. Vines of ivy and jasmine might have spilled over the stone walls, weaving themselves into cascades of green, perfuming the air with their blossoms. The terraces would not have been uniform, but alive with variety. Shrubs of myrtle, laurel, and oleander could have filled the lower levels, their leaves shining in the light, their blossoms bright with reds, pinks, and purples. Higher up, fruit trees would have shaded the paths, figs heavy with ripening fruit, pomegranates bursting with ruby seeds, olives glistening among silvery leaves. These trees offered more than beauty. They offered sustenance, nourishment, and a reminder that the gardens were not only ornamental but fertile. There may also have been plants brought from the queen's homeland, Media. If legend is true, and the gardens were built to ease her homesickness, then saplings of fir, cypress, or pine could have been transported across the empire, planted carefully in Babylon's soil. For a queen longing for the hills and forests of her youth, the sight of familiar trees would have been a balm to the spirit. To walk beneath their shade, to breathe in their resinous scent, was to feel home reborn in a foreign land. The upper terraces may have been filled with tall palms, date trees swaying in the breeze, their long fronds creating cool shadows. Dates, a staple of Mesopotamian life, would have hung in heavy clusters, offering sweetness to those who plucked them. Between the palms, groves of tamarisk or cedar may have grown, their trunks strong, their presence majestic. The air would have carried a blend of fragrances, sharp pine, sweet jasmine, earthy myrrh, the delicate perfume of roses, all mixing into a harmony that lingered in every breath. And what of herbs? Babylonian culture was rich in the use of plants for medicine, food, and ritual. It is likely that basil, mint, coriander, and thyme were cultivated here. The soft touch of mint leaves might release a cooling scent into the air. The bitter sharpness of thyme or the sweetness of coriander could add depth to the fragrance around you. Perhaps the queen herself walked among these herbs, gathering sprigs to scent her chambers, or to flavor the meals prepared for her. One can imagine also plants with exotic origins, flowers and trees gifted by distant rulers, or carried along the routes of trade. Blue lotuses from Egypt, their blossoms floating in pools, may have been cultivated in shallow basins. Almond trees from Persia, fragrant with their spring blossoms, could have stood beside olive groves. Even rare spices, like cinnamon bark or frankincense trees, may have found a place here, their presence reminding visitors of lands far beyond Babylon's walls. To wander through such a place would be to move through seasons all at once. Blossoms opened in one corner, fruits ripened in another, while evergreen leaves whispered in the breeze above. The gardens may have been designed to dazzle the eye with constant change, so that no matter when you entered, something new awaited. But it was not only the sight of the plants that mattered, it was the way they touched every sense. The colors of blossoms filled the vision, but the scents filled the breath, the sounds of rustling leaves filled the ears, the taste of ripe fruit lingered on the tongue, and the touch of leaves, bark, and soil grounded the body. Every step in the gardens was an invitation to experience life in all its forms. For the people of Babylon, who lived surrounded by desert and sun, this abundance of greenery must have seemed like a dream. To see trees that came from distant lands, to taste fruits not native to the region, was to witness the wealth and reach of their empire. For travelers and ambassadors, the gardens served as a living display of Babylon's power, an empire that could gather the beauty of the world into one place. And for the queen, Amytes, these plants would have been more than marvels. They were memory and comfort. The pines reminded her of the cool hills of Media. The roses spoke of love. The figs and dates brought sustenance, while the herbs reminded her of the meals of her homeland. Every plant carried a story, every blossom a thread tying her past to her present. As you rest now, imagine yourself pausing at a shaded bench in the gardens. Around you, roses nod gently, their petals trembling in the breeze. Above, the branches of a pomegranate tree bend low, heavy with fruit. Vines trail across the stone, their blossoms perfuming the air. You reach out and touch the rough bark of a cedar, its resin leaving a faint scent on your fingers. You close your eyes, breathing deeply, surrounded by the fragrance of herbs, the sweetness of blossoms, the earthy dampness of soil. The hanging gardens were not only a triumph of engineering, nor only an act of devotion. They were a living museum of nature, a place where the world's flora was gathered, nurtured, and allowed to flourish in harmony. They were a reminder of how deeply connected people are to plants, their beauty, their nourishment, their comfort, their power to carry memory and emotion. And though centuries have passed, though no living blossom of the gardens remains, their imagined flora continues to stir our senses. In the silence of night, as you drift into rest, you may still walk among them, surrounded by roses, palms, figs, and herbs, as if the paradise of the hanging gardens had opened once more to welcome you inside. While the plants of the hanging gardens dazzled with their blossoms and fragrance, it is likely that the living creatures who made their homes there added another dimension of beauty and wonder. Gardens are rarely silent places. Even in the most carefully constructed terraces, life finds a way to take root, not only in flowers and trees, but in the animals that shelter beneath them and the birds that sing among their branches. The hanging gardens, perched high above the city of Babylon, must have been filled with movement, sound, and the quiet presence of creatures great and small. Imagine, for a moment, standing on one of the higher terraces, shaded by palms and pines. The air is filled with the soft rustle of leaves, but above that sound comes the trill of birdsong. Bright-colored songbirds, drawn by the abundance of fruit and blossoms, may have perched among the branches. Their calls would echo gently off the stone walls, creating a chorus that accompanied every walk through the gardens. The date palms and fig trees would have attracted flocks of doves and pigeons, their wings flashing as they moved from branch to branch. These birds were familiar to Babylonians, symbols of love, fertility, and peace, and their cooing sounds may have become part of the garden's natural music. Partridges, too, were common in Mesopotamia, their soft clucking filling the undergrowth. Perhaps even peacocks, imported from lands farther east, strutted proudly across the terraces, their iridescent feathers shimmering in the sunlight, their cries echoing into the warm air. Water, always flowing through the gardens to nourish the plants, would have drawn other creatures. Pools or channels may have reflected the sky, where herons or cranes stood silently, waiting to catch a glimpse of fish or insects. Frogs could have rested at the water's edge, croaking softly at dusk, their voices blending with the evening air. Insects hovered over the surface, their wings glinting in the sun, feeding the smaller birds that darted through the air in quick, darting flashes of movement. Where there are trees, there are also small creatures that climb and scurry. The terraces, with their layers of stone and lush greenery, may have become a haven for squirrels or small rodents, darting along branches, pausing to nibble at figs or dates. Lizards might have basked on the sun-warmed stones, their bodies perfectly still until, in an instant, they dashed into the safety of shadow. To walk through the gardens would have been to notice this constant quiet activity, tiny flashes of life that revealed the gardens were not still but ever-changing, ever alive. For the queen, Amytes, and for those who wandered these terraces, these animals would have been both companions and symbols. In the cool of the morning, the sound of birdsong could lift the spirit, reminding her of her homeland, where the mountains too were alive with life. In the heat of midday, the sight of butterflies drifting lazily among the blossoms, or bees moving busily from flower to flower, might bring both calm and wonder. And in the stillness of evening, as the sun sank over the horizon, the chorus of frogs, night birds, and crickets would rise, turning the gardens into a living lullaby. The presence of animals also reminded the Babylonians of their myths and beliefs. Doves, for instance, were sacred to Ishtar, goddess of love and fertility. Their cooing among the branches could have been heard as a divine blessing. Lions, though unlikely to live within the gardens themselves, were closely associated with Babylon and its kings. Statues or reliefs of lions may have decorated the terraces, while their real-life presence remained outside the walls. Still, the smaller animals within the gardens echoed that symbolism: strength in the peacock's proud display, gentleness in the dove's quiet flight, abundance in the frogs that thrived where water flowed. It is not difficult to imagine how these creatures contributed to the sensory experience of the hanging gardens. The fragrance of roses mingled with the sweet notes of birdsong. The trickle of water was joined by the buzz of insects and the hum of bees. The touch of a breeze rustling through branches carried with it the cry of a heron lifting into the sky. Together, these sounds, sights, and movements made the gardens not only beautiful to see, but alive to every sense. As you picture the terraces now, let your mind wander into a peaceful scene. You sit beneath the shade of a pomegranate tree, the stone beneath you cool and smooth. Above, a cluster of doves shift and murmur softly in the branches. From somewhere nearby comes the clear, bright call of a songbird, answered by another in the distance. The air is warm, but a breeze stirs, carrying with it the scent of herbs and blossoms, and the flutter of a butterfly passes before your eyes. A lizard scurries across a sunlit wall and disappears into the ivy, while bees hum lazily as they gather nectar from jasmine vines. Every sound and movement blends together into harmony, a rhythm of life that is steady, soft, and endlessly soothing. For the Babylonians, this harmony of plants and animals would have been proof of the garden's divine favor. A place that gathered water, greenery, and living creatures in such abundance must surely have been touched by the gods. And for us, imagining it now, it is a reminder of how deeply humans are drawn to life's quiet symphony, the companionship of birds, the stillness of animals at rest, the sense of connection to a world alive around us. The hanging gardens may no longer exist, their stones and terraces long lost to time. Yet, when we think of them, we do not picture empty stonework or silent pathways. We picture the flutter of wings, the hum of bees, the laughter of water, the croak of frogs at dusk. We picture life in every corner, filling the air with a chorus of sound, color, and motion. Even now, in the silence of night, if you close your eyes, you may hear it still, the gentle coo of doves, the trill of songbirds, the rustle of leaves. A living garden, ancient and eternal, carrying you toward rest. While the hanging gardens rose in green terraces above the city, life in Babylon stretched outward in many directions. The gardens may have been a secluded paradise, meant for the queen and the royal household, but beyond their walls, the great city of Babylon was alive with energy, movement, and daily rhythm. To truly understand the contrast between the lush tranquility of the gardens and the bustling life below, one must imagine not only the greenery and water above, but also the thriving palace and city that surrounded it. At the heart of Babylon stood the royal palace, a vast complex of halls, courtyards, and chambers, built from the same mud brick and stone that gave shape to the hanging gardens. The palace was a world unto itself, filled with officials, guards, scribes, servants, and attendants who ensured that the machinery of empire kept turning. Here, decisions that shaped Mesopotamia and beyond were made. Couriers arrived with messages from distant provinces, ambassadors came to offer tribute or negotiate alliances, and soldiers moved in and out to carry the king's commands to the far edges of his realm. The palace was power embodied, its walls decorated with reliefs of lions, bulls, and gods, symbols meant to remind all who entered of the might of Babylon's rulers. For the royal family, life in the palace was structured by ceremony and ritual. Banquets were held in grand halls, where long tables were filled with roasted meats, bread, fruits, and wines brought from distant lands. Musicians played harps and drums, dancers performed, and priests invoked blessings from the gods. The queen, Amytes, would have walked through these spaces draped in embroidered garments, her presence both political and personal, a living link between Babylon and her Median homeland. And yet, while grandeur filled the palace, it was the gardens that provided her a retreat from the demands of royal life, a place where her soul could rest. Step beyond the palace walls, and the great city of Babylon opened itself in layers. Babylon was said to be one of the largest cities of the ancient world, home to hundreds of thousands of people. Its streets were busy with merchants, craftsmen, farmers, soldiers, priests, and families, all moving through their daily tasks. Narrow lanes wound between mud-brick houses, where children played in the dust and women drew water from wells. In the larger avenues, carts creaked under the weight of goods, pulled by donkeys, while traders called out their wares to passers-by. The markets were alive with sound and color. Here, stalls overflowed with grain, dates, figs, and olives. Potters displayed their jars and bowls, while weavers sold cloth dyed in rich colors. Spices filled the air with their sharp fragrances, cinnamon, cumin, coriander, and saffron, all brought in along the trade routes that made Babylon a hub of commerce. Jewelers offered bracelets and earrings of gold and lapis lazuli, shining in the sunlight. Traders from far-off lands mingled in the crowd, their languages blending into a chorus of voices, their goods a reminder that Babylon's reach stretched across deserts, rivers, and mountains. The people of Babylon lived not only in work and trade, but in ritual and worship. The great ziggurat of Etemenanke, dedicated to Marduk, rose high above the city, its terraces echoing the very structure of the Hanging Gardens. Here, priests climbed its steps to offer sacrifices, prayers, and chants, seeking the favor of the gods. Temples to other deities, large and small, were scattered throughout the city, each one filled with statues, offerings, and incense. For Babylonians, life was always entwined with the divine. Every feast, every harvest, every battle was believed to be touched by the will of the gods, and so the city hummed not only with human effort but with sacred devotion. Babylon was also a city of walls and gates, mighty fortifications that protected its people and proclaimed its grandeur. The most famous of these was the Ishtar Gate, adorned with glazed blue tiles and images of lions, bulls, and dragons. To pass through this gate was to step into a world of myth and majesty, where artistry and symbolism blended into stone and brick. Travelers, merchants, and ambassadors entering the city would have felt awe at the sight, their footsteps echoing along the grand processional way that led toward the heart of Babylon. And yet, for all its size and splendor, the city was also filled with the ordinary rhythms of life. Families cooked meals over hearths, children played with clay toys, scribes wrote contracts and accounts on clay tablets, and laborers toiled in workshops or on construction projects. In the evenings, as the sun sank behind the horizon, torches lit the streets, families gathered in courtyards, and the air cooled as the desert winds swept in. Above the rooftops, the gardens stood as a green crown upon the palace, visible from many parts of the city, a constant reminder of royal wealth and ingenuity. To the people below, the gardens may have seemed almost magical. Few would have walked their terraces, for they were meant for the royal household, but their presence was felt throughout Babylon. To know that their king could command water to flow upward, that he could bring trees and flowers from distant lands to flourish in a desert city, was to feel the strength of empire and the favor of the gods. The gardens were both a private refuge and a public statement, a symbol that Babylon was unlike any other place in the world. As you picture this contrast, imagine yourself standing in the bustling streets below. Around you, merchants shout, donkeys bray, and children laugh. The air is filled with the smell of spices, bread, and smoke from hearth fires. Above it all, rising like a vision, you catch sight of the green terraces of the Hanging Gardens, their trees swaying gently in the breeze, their vines tumbling over walls of stone. In that moment, you feel both the pulse of the city and the calm of the gardens, two worlds side by side, one of noise and life, the other of stillness and retreat. And when the day comes to an end, when Babylon grows quiet and the stars appear in the night sky, the gardens remain, their plants whispering in the wind, their waters glimmering in moonlight. The city rests, but the gardens dream, carrying both queen and people into the realm of myth and memory. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, if they truly existed, were not static monuments of stone and greenery. They were living spaces, constantly shifting with light, sound, and movement. To imagine their wonder is to imagine how they changed with the passing of the hours, how they looked and felt in morning, afternoon, and evening, and how their presence shifted as day gave way to night. The rhythm of the gardens was not only the rhythm of water flowing and plants growing, it was the rhythm of time itself, weaving light and shadow across terraces filled with life. Picture the gardens at dawn. The city below is still quiet, its streets touched only by the first pale light of the rising sun. A faint mist clings to the Euphrates, and the cool air carries the promise of a new day. On the terraces, the plants awaken slowly. Dew glistens on the leaves of roses and lilies, shining like jewels in the morning light. Birds stir in the branches, their first calls echoing softly, tentative at first, then growing into a chorus. The water, always flowing upward through ingenious devices, catches the glow of sunrise, turning channels and pools into ribbons of gold. For Queen Ametes, perhaps these early hours were the most peaceful, a time to walk the shaded paths, to breathe in the cool air, and to feel the gardens as her own private sanctuary before the city below burst into noise and movement. As morning deepens, the sun rises higher, and the gardens fill with warmth. Servants move through the terraces, tending to plants, pruning branches, and gathering herbs. Gardeners, skilled in the knowledge of soil and water, check the channels to ensure the flow remains steady, that every tree and blossom receives its share of life. Bees emerge, buzzing lazily from flower to flower, and butterflies dance through shafts of sunlight. The air becomes rich with fragrance, the sweetness of blossoms, the freshness of herbs, the earthy scent of damp soil. Life in the gardens grows active, yet remains serene, every sound and movement blending into harmony. By midday, the gardens are radiant under the full power of the sun. Light pours down on the stone terraces, reflecting off pools of water, shimmering through leaves and fronds. The shade of tall trees becomes a place of retreat, where benches or resting spots invite visitors to sit and breathe. The queen and her attendants may have gathered here for meals, enjoying figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates plucked from the very branches above them. The sound of doves cooing in the trees, the laughter of water spilling from terrace to terrace, and the rustle of palms swaying in the breeze create a lullaby of midday calm. Despite the heat, the gardens offer coolness in shadow and comfort in sound, an oasis of green in a desert city. As the afternoon stretches on, the light softens, shifting from gold to amber. Shadows lengthen across the terraces, creating patterns of leaves and vines on the stone. The bustle of the palace quiets slightly as people seek rest from the heat. In the gardens, the animals remain active, songbirds still flit among blossoms, frogs croak near shaded pools, and squirrels or small rodents scurry in search of fallen fruit. Servants refill basins and adjust the flow of water, ensuring its endless journey upward does not falter. The queen, perhaps, walked here in these hours, seeking solace in the sight of familiar trees from her homeland. To see their branches glowing in the soft afternoon light may have brought her comfort and peace, easing her longing for the hills she once knew. Then comes evening, when the city below shifts again. The markets quiet, the streets cool, and torches flicker to life. In the gardens, the setting sun paints everything in warm tones, roses glow crimson, palms turn bronze, and water gleams like liquid fire as it slips down channels and falls into basins. Birds call more softly now, some settling into nests, while night insects begin their gentle hum. The fragrance of jasmine and myrtle deepens in the cooling air, rising like invisible offerings to the sky. Evening in the gardens was likely a time of reflection, a moment for the royal family to gather, to breathe in the scents, to feel the calm descend with the twilight. Finally, night falls. The city below glows with lamps and hearth fires, but above it, the gardens enter their own quiet dream. The moonlight silvers the leaves, casting shadows that ripple with the movement of branches in the breeze. Pools and streams mirror the stars, so that water and sky seem to merge. The sounds of the gardens change. The trill of daytime birds is replaced by the chirp of crickets, the croak of frogs, the whisper of leaves in the night wind. For those who walk the terraces beneath the stars, the gardens became something otherworldly, as if suspended between earth and sky, a sanctuary both real and dreamlike. It is easy to imagine Queen Amytes standing on a high terrace, gazing out over the sleeping city of Babylon. The streets below are still, the Euphrates gleams in moonlight, and above all rises the green crown of her gardens, filled with scents and sounds even in darkness. Perhaps she closed her eyes and listened, the distant call of a night bird, the murmur of water, the soft whisper of branches, and felt herself at home, not in the flat lands of Babylon, but in the hills of Media reborn in her palace. The daily rhythm of the gardens was more than the turning of hours. It was the meeting of natural cycles, sunrise and sunset, heat and cool, noise and silence, with the artistry of human hands. Engineers built the terraces, but it was time that animated them. The light of dawn, the heat of noon, the colors of evening, the silver calm of night, each gave the gardens a different face, a different soul. To visit once was never the same as visiting again, for the gardens lived in the flow of hours, changing endlessly with the day. As you rest now, let yourself imagine this rhythm wrapping around you. The glow of sunrise, the warmth of midday, the golden calm of evening, the silver dream of night. In the hanging gardens, time flowed gently, carrying those who walked their paths into peace, reminding them that every moment, whether bright or dim, carried beauty. And as the cycle turned, as one day faded into another, the gardens endured, a timeless rhythm echoing through centuries, a song of light, water, and life. The hanging gardens of Babylon were more than an architectural marvel and more than a place of rest for a homesick queen. To the Babylonians, and to those who later heard of them, the gardens carried meaning that reached beyond stone, water, and trees. They were not simply gardens but symbols, living metaphors that reflected the power of kings, the favor of the gods, and the human longing for paradise on earth. To understand their deeper significance is to step into the realm where history and myth weave together, where each terrace of greenery carried not only roots and blossoms, but ideas and dreams. In Mesopotamian culture, gardens were never just practical spaces. They were sacred places, tied closely to religion and kingship. To create a garden was to create order out of chaos, to carve beauty and fertility out of the wilderness or the desert. It echoed the very acts of the gods, who brought order to the cosmos from primordial waters. The hanging gardens, lush with flowing water and exotic plants, symbolized this act on a grand scale. They were the king's way of demonstrating that he, too, could shape chaos into order, that he held divine authority not only over people and cities but over nature itself. For Nebuchadnezzar too, the king most often associated with their construction, the gardens would have been a display of his devotion, not just to his queen Amytes, but to the gods. In Babylon, kingship was a sacred duty. The king was chosen by the gods to rule and to protect. By creating gardens in the heart of his city, Nebuchadnezzar was aligning himself with divine will. He was presenting himself as a provider of abundance, a shepherd of prosperity, a ruler who ensured life flourished even in the heat of the Mesopotamian plain. Every tree and blossom was a statement that the gods favored Babylon and that its ruler could manifest their blessing in living form. To the people of the city, the sight of the gardens rising high above the palace must have stirred more than admiration. In a land where summer heat baked the earth and where water was precious, to see greenery in such abundance was to witness a vision of paradise. Mesopotamian myths often spoke of gardens of the gods, lush, fertile, perfect spaces where divine beings walked. One such myth described the Garden of Dilmun, a place without sickness, death, or sorrow, a land of eternal freshness. The hanging gardens, though built by human hands, may have seemed like a glimpse of such divine realms, a piece of heaven transplanted onto earth. The symbolism also spoke to cultural memory. In Mesopotamian stories, rivers and water were gifts of the gods, sustaining life and civilization. The gardens, with their channels, pools, and flowing water, embodied this belief. They turned the king's palace into a microcosm of creation itself, where water flowed upward to sustain life, as if the forces of nature had been tamed and redirected for human joy. To see water carried into the air, defying the natural course of rivers flowing downward, must have appeared miraculous, another sign of Babylon's extraordinary destiny. For Amytes, the queen from Media, the symbolism was more personal. The gardens stood as a reminder of home, a bridge between lands. In their terraces, she saw not only trees and flowers but the continuation of her own story, the joining of Median mountains with Babylonian plains. In this way, the gardens symbolized unity between peoples, a living testament to alliance, love, and harmony. They were a marriage not only of two individuals, but of two cultures. Later generations, too, found symbolic meaning in the hanging gardens. To the Greeks who wrote about them centuries after their supposed construction, they became one of the 7 wonders of the world, not only for their physical beauty but because they represented human ability to transcend nature. In their writings, the gardens were a triumph of ingenuity and imagination, proof that humans could recreate paradise through skill and vision. For travelers and storytellers, the gardens symbolized the wealth and splendor of the East, a vision of abundance set against the deserts of Mesopotamia. Even beyond history, the idea of the hanging gardens resonates with deeper human longings. Across many cultures, gardens have been imagined as paradises, places of peace, abundance, and eternal rest. In Hebrew tradition, there was the Garden of Eden, where humans once walked in innocence and harmony. In Persian culture, the word paradisa meant enclosed garden, and came to symbolize paradise itself. The hanging gardens, in their beauty and mystery, may have inspired or echoed these ideas, becoming one more version of humanity's dream of a perfect place untouched by suffering or decay. The gardens also embodied contrasts that made them symbolically powerful. They were both natural and artificial, a collaboration between human hands and living growth. They were private, meant for the queen's solace, and yet public, seen by the city as a wonder. They were rooted in the earth, yet suspended above it, hanging in the air like a vision. These contrasts gave them a liminal quality, as if they existed between worlds, between earth and sky, between desert and forest, between mortal life and divine paradise. As you imagine the hanging gardens now, let their symbolism flow through you like water through their channels. Picture them not only as stone and plants, but as a vision of abundance in the midst of scarcity, as a bridge between cultures, as a promise of love, and as a reflection of the eternal dream of paradise. Feel the way they invite you into stillness, the way they remind you that beauty can exist even in the harshest places, that life can bloom even where it seems impossible. And as the night deepens, let the symbolism of the gardens accompany you into rest. For just as the Babylonians once looked up at their green terraces and saw the favor of the gods, you too can look inward and imagine a garden of your own, a place of calm, of abundance, of harmony. The hanging gardens may be lost to history, but their meaning endures, whispering still of paradise on earth, a dream planted in stone, water, and memory. To truly appreciate the wonder of the hanging gardens, it helps to imagine the reactions of those who first saw them, travelers, ambassadors, merchants, and envoys arriving in Babylon. For people accustomed to the arid plains and flat landscapes of Mesopotamia, the sight of verdant terraces rising above the city must have seemed almost magical, as if the land itself had been transformed by divine hands. They came from distant lands, some from deserts even harsher than Babylon's, others from lush regions far away, and all were struck by the audacity and beauty of the gardens. Picture a traveling envoy arriving from Persia, stepping off a camel or donkey, dust covering his robes, the sun hot on his back. His first glance toward the palace shows not just mud brick walls and stone courtyards, but a cascade of greenery suspended in the air. The terraces seem to float above the city, each level overflowing with plants, blossoms, and trees that he recognizes from distant lands, some native to Media, some from far-off lands he has only heard of in stories. Water trickles down in gleaming streams, and birds flutter among the branches, their calls clear and melodic in the warm air. The envoy stops, momentarily forgetting the heat and travel, captivated by the impossible sight before him. A merchant from the Mediterranean might have viewed the gardens through a slightly different lens. Used to cities with modest private gardens or enclosed courtyards, he would marvel at the scale and ambition of Babylon's terraces. The combination of engineering and nature, the way water is lifted to sustain life high above the ground, the careful arrangement of trees and flowers, the harmony of birds, insects, and flowing streams, would have seemed almost otherworldly. To him, the gardens were not merely a display of wealth, but a demonstration of human skill, imagination, and mastery over the natural world. He may have whispered to his companions that no palace or city he had ever visited contained such beauty, such abundance, such a vision of paradise. For ambassadors, especially those arriving to offer tribute or negotiate treaties, the gardens served a political as well as aesthetic function. They were a statement of power and prestige, a subtle reminder that Babylon's king could command the elements themselves. Imagine an ambassador from Egypt, accustomed to the Nile and the lush riverbanks, standing on the processional way and looking up at the gardens. He may have felt a mixture of admiration and awe, recognizing that Babylon had gathered the beauty of the world into one place, arranging it with precision, artistry, and divine favor. For visitors, the gardens were both a delight for the senses and a lesson in the reach and influence of Babylonian kingship. Travelers' descriptions, passed down through centuries, often emphasized the sensory impact of the gardens. They spoke of walking through terraces where the air was fragrant with roses and jasmine, where streams of water sparkled like silver, and where exotic trees offered shade and fruit. The interplay of light and shadow, the gentle murmur of water, the rustling of leaves, and the songs of birds created an atmosphere of calm and wonder. One can imagine them pausing at the edge of a terrace, inhaling the scent of blooming flowers, letting the coolness of shaded paths soothe their sun-warmed skin, and feeling a sense of reverence as if they had entered a sacred place. Even those who may have been skeptical or hardened by travel could not escape the garden's effect. Their size, ingenuity, and beauty defied ordinary explanation. Stories describe visitors marveling at the engineering, how water could be raised to such heights, how terraces supported trees and plants without collapsing, how the gardens appeared to hang in the air as if floating above the city. To them, the hanging gardens were a miracle of human craft, a triumph that blurred the line between imagination and reality. For some, the gardens were also a personal revelation. A traveler who had endured deserts and scorching sun might see the hanging gardens as a vision of hope, a promise that even in the harshest environments, life could thrive. The lush greenery, the flowing water, the sweet fragrance of flowers, they offered a moment of peace and reflection, a brief escape from the challenges of travel and daily life. Travelers may have lingered longer than necessary, drawn to the terraces by the sound of water, the shade of trees, or the sight of fruit ripening in the sun. The gardens, in their suspended serenity, were a balm for the spirit. Ambassadors and travelers alike would have carried stories of the hanging gardens back to their homelands, describing not only their beauty but the wonder of their construction and the emotions they inspired. These tales spread far beyond Babylon, shaping legends and myths that would endure for centuries. Even as time passed and the gardens themselves vanished, these accounts preserved their memory, ensuring that the image of paradise rising above a desert city continued to inspire imagination, admiration, and awe. Imagine, finally, stepping into the gardens as these travelers did, pausing to drink in the colors, the sounds, and the scents. Water glimmers in channels along stone terraces, birds sing from branches above, and the fragrance of roses and herbs fills the air. You move slowly along shaded paths, watching doves coo and butterflies drift lazily across sunlight-dappled stones. In this moment, you feel what they felt: amazement, reverence, and the gentle realization that you are witnessing something extraordinary, something both human and divine. The hanging gardens, seen through the eyes of travelers and ambassadors, were more than a private palace retreat. They were a testament to the ingenuity, ambition, and artistry of Babylon. They were a reminder of what humans could achieve when imagination, devotion, and knowledge were combined. And they were a place where every visitor, whether weary, curious, or awestruck, could pause, breathe, and step into a vision of paradise suspended above the city, even if only for a fleeting moment. One of the most mysterious and fascinating aspects of the hanging gardens of Babylon is the question of how they actually functioned. How, in a city surrounded by desert plains and scorching heat, could water be lifted to sustain terraces of trees, flowers, and exotic plants high above the palace walls? How could stone terraces hold the weight of soil, roots, and flowing water without collapsing? The answers remain partly lost to history, but by imagining the ingenuity required, we can appreciate the gardens not only as a marvel of beauty, but as a triumph of engineering, patience, and careful observation of the natural world. At the heart of the garden's survival was water, the lifeblood of all plants. The Euphrates River flowed through Babylon, providing a steady source. Yet lifting water upward against gravity posed a challenge. Some ancient texts suggest that engineers used a system of chains and buckets, perhaps powered by oxen or human labor, to draw water from the river and carry it up through a series of channels. Others propose that a screw-like device, similar to what later became known as the Archimedes screw, could have been used to lift water efficiently. Regardless of the method, the principle remained the same: constant movement of water from the river into the terraces, nourishing plants at every level. Once lifted, water had to be distributed carefully. Imagine terraces arranged in layers, each one slightly set back from the one below, allowing water to cascade gently from one level to the next. Channels lined with brick or stone guided the flow, creating pools, fountains, and streams that ensured no plant went thirsty. This system would have required constant attention. Gardeners and engineers likely worked together, checking channels for leaks, adjusting water levels, and ensuring that pressure did not overwhelm the stone walls or flood delicate plants. Their careful work transformed the impossible into a living, breathing garden. The terraces themselves were feats of structural ingenuity. They had to support immense weight. Soil, trees, and flowing water can be surprisingly heavy. Builders may have reinforced the terraces with vaulted brickwork or layered stone, techniques known to Mesopotamian architects. Waterproofing materials, possibly a mix of clay and bitumen, would have lined the channels and basins, preventing water from seeping into the stone and weakening the structure. In this way, each terrace became both a foundation and a stage, capable of holding the beauty and abundance of life without collapsing under its own weight. Some scholars suggest that the gardens may have employed an early form of terraced irrigation designed to mimic natural slopes. Water would trickle downward slowly, nourishing plants while preventing soil erosion. Shallow basins collected excess water, allowing it to percolate gradually through the soil. This method created both a practical and aesthetic effect. Plants were evenly hydrated, and water could be seen glimmering along terraces, falling into pools, and reflecting sunlight in a steady, peaceful rhythm. To walk among the terraces was to witness engineering and nature working together in perfect harmony. The choice of plants also reflected careful planning. Trees with shallow roots may have been selected for higher terraces, reducing strain on the stone beneath. Vines and smaller shrubs filled gaps, creating lush coverage while distributing weight evenly. Fruit trees were placed where sunlight was strongest, while shade-tolerant plants thrived in shadowed corners. The entire layout was likely designed with both beauty and practicality in mind, demonstrating that the engineers who built the gardens were not only masters of construction, but also keen observers of the natural world. Even the flow of water may have been part of a larger environmental design. Channels and pools created humidity in the air, cooling terraces under the sun and helping delicate plants survive in the heat. Waterfall-like streams produced sound, masking the noise of the city below and creating a calming atmosphere. Birds and small animals were drawn to water, adding life and movement to the terraces. In this way, the gardens were a self-sustaining ecosystem, blending engineering with ecology in a manner centuries ahead of its time. The labor required to maintain the gardens must have been immense. Teams of gardeners, technicians, and laborists worked in rhythm, ensuring the smooth functioning of hydraulic systems, trimming plants, clearing debris, and monitoring water flow. Their work was largely invisible to visitors, yet it was essential. Without constant care, the delicate balance of stone, soil, and water could have collapsed, and the paradise above the city would have withered. The gardens were alive not only in their plants and animals, but in the tireless devotion of those who tended them. Imagine now walking along a high terrace, listening to the soft murmur of water spilling into a shallow pool. You see vines climbing trellises, roots anchored firmly in carefully layered soil, birds darting among branches, and flowers swaying in a gentle breeze. Above, the sun sparkles on the surface of the water, and below, the city of Babylon stretches outward. Every element, the stone terraces, the channels of water, the careful selection of plants, reveals the ingenuity and dedication of their creators. The gardens were more than a collection of beauty, they were a triumph of human imagination made real, an orchestration of natural and mechanical forces in perfect harmony. Even today, centuries later, We are captivated not only by their beauty, but by their engineering. We may never know exactly how water was lifted, or precisely how terraces were supported, yet imagining the solutions inspires awe. The Hanging Gardens were a place where science, art, and devotion converged, creating a space that delighted the senses, soothed the mind, and embodied human ingenuity at its finest. As you drift into rest, picture yourself walking slowly through the terraces, water flowing gently around your feet, birds singing overhead, and sunlight glinting on stone channels. Feel the weight of history beneath you, the care and labor that made such a place possible. In this suspended paradise, human skill meets nature's beauty, forming a harmony that invites calm, reflection, and wonder. The Hanging Gardens were a marvel not only of imagination, but of understanding, the marriage of art and engineering, of water and stone, of nature and human hands. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon did not merely impress those who saw them, their influence stretched far beyond the city walls, leaving an imprint on art, literature, and human imagination for centuries to come. Even if their precise location and existence remain a mystery, the idea of a lush paradise suspended above a desert city captured minds across civilizations. From Greek historians to poets of the medieval world, the gardens became a symbol of human ingenuity, devotion, and the timeless desire to recreate paradise on earth. Their legacy endures, not in stone or soil, but in stories, images, and the dreams they inspired. In Greek writings, the gardens were described with awe and reverence. Historians such as Strabo and Philo of Byzantium recorded tales of terraces overflowing with greenery, water flowing upward through complex machinery, and trees imported from distant lands. These accounts emphasized not only the garden's beauty but the skill required to create them, elevating the Hanging Gardens to a place among the wonders of the world. To the Greeks, accustomed to architectural marvels in marble and stone, the gardens represented a different kind of artistry, a fusion of engineering, horticulture, and aesthetic vision, all set in the heart of a faraway empire. Artists and storytellers of later centuries drew inspiration from these accounts. Illustrations of the Hanging Gardens appear in medieval manuscripts, Renaissance paintings, and sketches, each imagining the terraces in intricate detail. Painters sought to capture the wonder of greenery suspended in the air, the elegance of cascading water, and the vibrancy of exotic flowers. Even when exact architectural plans were unknown, imagination filled in the gaps, creating images that conveyed the garden's otherworldly beauty. The Hanging Gardens became not merely a historical reference, but a visual language for paradise itself, a symbol of abundance, creativity, and human achievement. Literature, too, celebrated the gardens. Poets and writers across the centuries used them as metaphors for harmony, love, and the blending of nature and culture. They became a symbol of romantic longing, representing spaces where beauty could flourish even in harsh conditions, much like the heart finding hope amid struggle. Medieval scholars described them as earthly echoes of divine gardens, blending historical curiosity with spiritual reflection. The garden's depiction in texts created a shared image that transcended geography and time, allowing people across the world to imagine the same terraces of greenery, cascading water, and fragrant blooms, even if they never saw them themselves. The gardens also influenced architectural design in later periods. Persian and Islamic gardens, for instance, emphasized terraces, water channels, and symmetry, creating enclosed spaces of reflection and beauty. While there is no direct evidence that the Hanging Gardens were the model, the concept of suspended or layered greenery as an idealized retreat is a recurring theme in later civilizations. Even in modern times, the notion of vertical gardens and green terraces draws upon the inspiration of Babylon's terraces, human ingenuity used to bring nature into constructed spaces. In this sense, the Hanging Gardens planted seeds that continue to bloom in architecture, urban planning, and landscape design. The garden's symbolism found its way into philosophy and moral reflection as well. Writers used them to contemplate the fleeting nature of human accomplishment, the interplay between ambition and beauty, and the harmony between humans and nature. They were often paired with meditations on power. A king capable of commanding water and growth could create wonders, yet such feats were also reminders that human effort is transient, and that the beauty of the world, once lost, remains preserved only in memory and imagination. The Hanging Gardens became a canvas for thought, blending history, legend, and ethical reflection into a single image of majesty. Stories of the gardens spread across continents. Travelers to the east recounted tales to their homelands, blending observation and legend. In Europe, during the Renaissance, writers described the Hanging Gardens as the pinnacle of civilization's artistic and technological skill, an emblem of cultural achievement far beyond their own lands. Their influence reached not only visual art and literature, but philosophy, science, and education. They were invoked as symbols of human ambition, creativity, and the desire to transcend the limitations of one's environment. Even today, the cultural legacy of the Hanging Gardens endures. They inspire novels, films, documentaries, and educational programs, allowing new generations to imagine the terraces, the flowing water, and the greenery that once, or perhaps only in imagination, rose above Babylon. Writers continue to use them as a metaphor for hope, ingenuity, and the blending of human skill with the natural world. Artists recreate them digitally or in miniature, exploring the beauty of suspended gardens, cascading water, and exotic plants. And architects envision vertical gardens, green skyscrapers, and rooftop terraces, echoing the spirit of the Hanging Gardens in modern urban spaces. Imagine now standing at the edge of one of these imagined terraces, looking outward. The terraces stretch above the city below, overflowing with trees, flowers, and vines. Water glistens as it flows gently down channels, birds dart among branches, and the fragrance of blooms fills the air. You are surrounded by both the tangible beauty of the gardens and the intangible legacy they have left in stories, art, and imagination. Every stone and every plant becomes a symbol, every trickle of water a reminder of human creativity. In the end, the cultural impact of the Hanging Gardens is as lasting as the memory of their beauty. Even if the stones themselves have crumbled and the terraces have vanished, the gardens continue to inspire awe, reflection, and creativity. They remind us that human imagination can reach across centuries, that our creations can become more than physical objects, they can become symbols, stories, and dreams. The Hanging Gardens live on in the collective imagination, a suspended paradise that invites calm, wonder, and the quiet contemplation that carries us toward rest and peace. Despite the vivid descriptions passed down through Greek historians and later writers, one of the most intriguing aspects of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon is the mystery surrounding their very existence. Unlike other wonders of the ancient world, no definitive archaeological evidence has been found to confirm the gardens ever stood in the city of Babylon. Scholars and historians have long debated whether the gardens were a real engineering marvel or a story that grew in the imagination of travelers and chroniclers. This uncertainty adds an air of enchantment to the gardens, allowing them to exist in the realms of both history and myth, suspended above reality like the terraces themselves. The first sources of information come primarily from Greek writers, centuries after the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II. Strabo, Philo of Byzantium, and Diodorus Siculus wrote accounts describing lush terraces, cascading water, and exotic plants, portraying a wonder unlike anything in the known world. Yet these descriptions were based on second-hand reports and oral traditions. There are no Babylonian records explicitly describing the gardens, and no inscriptions or detailed plans have been discovered. This lack of contemporary documentation raises questions. Were the gardens truly built, or were they a poetic invention to illustrate the king's grandeur? Archaeologists have searched Babylon extensively, uncovering palaces, temples, and ziggurats, yet no clear terraces have been identified that match the descriptions of the Hanging Gardens. Some suggest that natural erosion, flooding, and centuries of reconstruction could have erased the physical traces entirely. Others propose that the gardens may have existed in a different city altogether. For instance, some evidence points to Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, where records mention a terrace garden created by King Sennacherib. Its description bears striking resemblance to the accounts attributed to Babylon, suggesting that Greek writers may have confused the locations or merged multiple stories into a single legend. Modern archaeological debate continues with every new discovery. Excavations reveal canals, water channels, and stone foundations that could have supported terraces, yet nothing conclusively proves that the gardens existed as described. Scholars study Mesopotamian engineering techniques, exploring how water could have been lifted and distributed to sustain such a complex. Hydraulic devices, brick vaults, and layering systems demonstrate that such a feat was possible, but the absence of direct evidence keeps the question alive. Some argue that the gardens may have existed as smaller, less grandiose terraces, whose reputation grew over time into the legendary wonder remembered by history. The mystery itself is part of the garden's enduring charm. There is something almost magical in the idea of a place so extraordinary that even after thousands of years, its reality remains uncertain. This uncertainty allows the imagination to wander freely. One can picture terraces overflowing with roses and fruit trees, streams of water glimmering in the sun, and birds fluttering through branches without being constrained by precise archaeological accuracy. In this way, the gardens exist both in the mind and in history, a bridge between tangible achievement and enduring legend. The debate over their existence also highlights the interplay between memory, storytelling, and history. Travelers' tales, passed from Babylon to Greece and beyond, may have been embellished over generations. Poetic imagination could have amplified what might have been a modest royal garden into a wonder of epic scale. Yet even if exaggeration occurred, the very act of creating such a story reveals the cultural values of the time: admiration for ingenuity, reverence for kingship, and the human desire to believe in beauty and abundance in the heart of a harsh world. Some historians suggest that the garden's symbolic power outweighs the need for physical proof. Whether or not they truly existed in Babylon, the Hanging Gardens have shaped architecture, literature, and imagination for centuries. They inspired engineers to experiment with terraces and water systems, poets to write of paradise on earth, and artists to illustrate lush landscapes suspended above cities. In this way, their influence transcends physical reality, and the gardens exist in minds and cultures worldwide, proof that human creativity can outlive stone and mortar. Even skeptics acknowledge the value of the legend. By imagining the gardens, we explore the limits of ancient engineering and human ambition. We are invited to wonder how water could have flowed upward against gravity, how terraces could support trees, and how a city in a desert could sustain such life. The mystery encourages curiosity, a gentle reflection on both the ingenuity of the past and the power of storytelling. In this sense, the Hanging Gardens continue to teach, inspire, and soothe, as stories of their beauty drift softly into the imagination. As night falls over your own imagined terraces, picture the gardens as both real and unreal. Water trickles down stone channels, flowers sway in the breeze, and birds call from leafy branches, while the city below remains quiet and still. Whether these terraces were ever built, or whether they exist only in memory and myth, does not diminish their magic. The uncertainty invites your mind to wander freely, to explore every corner, every blossom, every ripple of water, knowing that the true wonder lies in imagining them as vividly as the ancients did. In this way, the mystery of the Hanging Gardens becomes part of their charm. They teach us that some wonders are timeless, existing not only in stone or soil but in imagination, stories, and dreams. And as you listen to the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft murmur of water in your mind, you realize that the gardens, real or imagined, carry you toward calm, reflection, and the quiet beauty of a place suspended above the world, eternal in memory and myth. Long after the last stone of Babylon may have crumbled, the Hanging Gardens have continued to live on in human imagination, inspiring writers, artists, filmmakers, and architects alike. Even without physical evidence, the image of terraces overflowing with lush greenery, streams of water cascading gently from one level to the next, and exotic flowers swaying in the breeze has captivated the minds of people across centuries. From historical texts to modern digital recreations, the gardens have become a symbol not only of beauty and ingenuity but also of humanity's longing to create paradise in the midst of the world's chaos. In literature, the Hanging Gardens often appear as a metaphor for beauty, abundance, and transcendence. Poets write of them as places of serenity, where time slows, and the soul can rest among fragrant blooms and flowing water. Authors of historical fiction place their characters within the terraces, describing walks along shaded paths, the sparkle of sunlight on water, and the gentle murmur of nature, creating immersive experiences for readers. Even children's books and fantastical stories draw upon the legend, using the gardens as a magical setting that sparks curiosity and wonder, teaching generations about history, imagination, and the timeless dream of suspended paradise. Filmmakers have also embraced the hanging gardens as a visual symbol of wonder. In movies and documentaries set in ancient Mesopotamia, the gardens are depicted as sprawling green terraces above the city, often lit with golden sunlight or shimmering moonlight. Animators and special effects artists recreate the flow of water, the rustle of leaves, and the movement of birds in ways that make the gardens feel alive. These visual portrayals allow audiences to experience a sense of awe, imagining the gardens as more than history. They become living spaces, breathing and moving above Babylon, even if only on the screen. Virtual reconstructions have taken the gardens into an entirely new realm. Using 3D modeling, architects and historians have attempted to bring the terraces to life in digital space. These reconstructions explore different interpretations. Some emphasize the engineering marvels, showing aqueducts, channels, and vaulted terraces. Others focus on aesthetic beauty, rendering cascading flowers, exotic plants, and serene pools. Interactive simulations allow people to walk through the gardens, listening to the sound of water, watching sunlight filter through leaves, and imagining the fragrance of blooms in the air. Through these modern tools, the hanging gardens become tangible in a way they could never have been for travelers in ancient Babylon, bridging history and imagination. Artists continue to be inspired as well. Paintings, illustrations, and digital art depict terraces filled with colors, water reflecting the sky, and birds and butterflies weaving through the air. Some artworks take liberties, creating fantastical versions where gardens float above deserts, cities, or even clouds. Others remain rooted in historical interpretations, using clay, stone, and water as guiding principles. Each piece reflects the enduring fascination with the garden's combination of nature, architecture, and human ingenuity. Even when imagined, the terraces evoke calm, wonder, and quiet reflection, the same feelings that may have greeted Babylonian visitors so many centuries ago. Modern gardens and architectural projects also draw inspiration from the hanging gardens. Vertical gardens, green rooftops, and terraced landscapes in cities today echo the same principles, using human skill to bring life into urban environments, creating spaces of tranquility, and balancing aesthetic beauty with practicality. Engineers and landscape designers study the flow of water, the placement of plants, and the integration of terraces to evoke the suspended harmony of Babylon's terraces. In this sense, the hanging gardens continue to shape not only imagination but also real spaces where people live, breathe, and relax. The garden's presence in museums, books, and educational media keeps the legend alive for new generations. Children learn about them as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, educators explore the engineering and horticultural ingenuity behind them, and storytellers encourage audiences to imagine walking along terraces filled with exotic plants and flowing water. Even without physical ruins, the gardens exist in shared memory, culture, and imagination, bridging gaps between ancient Babylon and the modern world. Imagine stepping into one of these modern recreations. You walk along a virtual terrace, feeling the sun on your skin and listening to the gentle trickle of water as it flows into a small pool. Birds flutter among vines, and the fragrance of jasmine and roses drifts on a digital breeze. Even in a simulated environment, there is calm, reflection, and a sense of wonder, the same emotions that the hanging gardens may have inspired thousands of years ago. Whether experienced on a screen, in a painting, or through imagination alone, the gardens remain a sanctuary, a timeless reminder of beauty, ingenuity, and serenity. The enduring fascination with the hanging gardens reveals more than historical curiosity. It shows the human desire for harmony between nature and human creation, the longing to build spaces that elevate the spirit and soothe the mind. In literature, films, and virtual reconstructions, the gardens continue to whisper their story, of flowing water, lush greenery, and terraces suspended above a bustling city. They remind us that even if the physical gardens are lost, their essence endures, carrying with it a sense of wonder, imagination, and calm that transcends time. As you close your eyes and imagine the terraces once more, hear the soft flow of water, feel the gentle breeze moving through trees and vines, and breathe in the imagined fragrance of distant blossoms. The hanging gardens, though centuries removed from our reality, remain alive in your mind, a peaceful sanctuary, a timeless symbol of creativity, patience, and the enduring human dream of paradise. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, whether real or imagined, offer more than historical fascination. They provide gentle lessons for modern life, particularly in the realms of mindfulness, patience, and creativity. As we reflect on their beauty, engineering, and enduring cultural impact, we can find guidance for how to slow down, appreciate the small details, and cultivate harmony in our own daily lives. In a world that often feels rushed, noisy, and chaotic, the gardens serve as a timeless reminder that tranquility, balance, and thoughtful design can coexist with ambition, growth, and creativity. One of the most important lessons of the gardens is the power of patience. The terraces were not built overnight. They required careful planning, skilled labor, and ongoing maintenance. Plants do not flourish instantly, water channels must be adjusted, and the balance of stone and soil must be preserved. In our own lives, the hanging gardens remind us that meaningful accomplishments, like personal growth or creative projects, take time. Just as the gardens required attention and care to thrive, so too do our ambitions flourish when nurtured patiently, with consistent effort and mindful awareness of each small step along the way. The gardens also teach us the importance of harmony with nature. In a desert city, water was precious, and every plant needed careful attention. The design of the terraces reflected not only aesthetic sensibilities but a deep understanding of how living systems work, how soil, water, sunlight, and air interact. For modern life, this translates into an appreciation for balance and sustainability. Mindfulness can be cultivated by observing how our actions affect the world around us, by creating spaces that encourage calm and rejuvenation, and by remembering that beauty often arises from cooperation between human effort and natural forces, rather than domination or haste. Another lesson lies in the thoughtful integration of functionality and aesthetics. The hanging gardens were engineering marvels, yet they were also places of wonder and serenity. Water flowed upward, terraces supported abundant greenery, and each level was designed to delight the senses. In our own lives, we can draw inspiration from this principle by blending practicality with moments of joy. Our routines, workspaces, and environments can serve both purpose and pleasure. By intentionally arranging our days, surroundings, and goals to be both functional and beautiful, we create spaces for calm, reflection, and fulfillment, just as the gardens created layers of serenity amid the bustling city. The gardens also embody the value of imagination and vision. Even if they existed only in stories, their legacy has inspired art, literature, architecture, and technology for centuries. In modern life, allowing ourselves to dream, to imagine possibilities beyond the immediate or the practical, enriches our creativity and enhances our ability to innovate. Mindfulness is not only about stillness but about opening space for curiosity and wonder, and the hanging gardens remind us that the human mind can create entire worlds of beauty, connection, and meaning when given the freedom to explore and envision. Connection and community are also reflected in the garden's story. They were built, maintained, and appreciated collectively. Kings, gardeners, engineers, and visitors all played a part in their existence. Similarly, our own well-being thrives in connection with others. Acts of care, whether tending a plant, listening to a friend, or contributing to a larger project, mirror the attentive work of those who ensured the gardens flourished. Mindfulness, in this sense, includes awareness of how our actions ripple outward, shaping the environment, the people around us, and the shared spaces we inhabit. The garden's rhythms also offer lessons for daily life. Morning light, afternoon warmth, and evening shadow created ever-changing perspectives and experiences within the terraces. In our own lives, noticing the rhythms of time, the changing of light, and the passage of hours can foster a sense of presence and grounding. By attuning ourselves to the flow of the day, we cultivate calm, appreciation, and awareness. Like the terraces, life has layers, moments of brilliance, quiet reflection, and gentle transitions. Observing these patterns with patience allows us to move gracefully through the day, embracing both activity and stillness. Finally, the hanging gardens invite reflection on resilience and adaptation. They flourished in an environment that was challenging, requiring ingenuity to survive the heat, maintain water, and support life above the city. Similarly, in our lives, challenges and obstacles can become opportunities for growth when approached thoughtfully. Mindfulness encourages us to notice our circumstances, to find creative solutions, and to nurture what matters most, our health, relationships, and passions, even amid difficulties. The gardens remind us that with care, effort, and imagination, thriving is possible even in unexpected or demanding conditions. As you picture the hanging gardens in your mind, let each terrace, flowing stream, and fragrant blossom guide your breath. Imagine walking slowly along shaded paths, noticing the gentle trickle of water, the rustle of leaves, and the soft songs of birds. With each step, you feel calm, grounded, and present. The lessons of patience, harmony, imagination, connection, and resilience flow gently through you, like water cascading from terrace to terrace, soothing and restoring. In the quiet of this imagined sanctuary, you are reminded that beauty, balance, and peace are not distant ideals. They can be cultivated in your own life, moment by moment, through attention, care, and awareness. The hanging gardens, whether they truly existed or only lived in story, offer a timeless invitation to slow down, to nurture what matters, and to find serenity amid the complexities of the world. As night deepens and thoughts grow soft, let the garden's calm envelop you, carrying you into reflection, rest, and the gentle rhythm of sleep. As we reach the final terraces of our journey through the hanging gardens of Babylon, it becomes clear that their true magic lies not only in stone, water, or soil, but in the enduring resonance of their story. These gardens, whether built with human hands or conjured in imagination, have transcended time, space, and history to become symbols of wonder, ingenuity, and serenity. They remind us that beauty can rise in the harshest places, that human creativity can harmonize with nature, and that the desire for paradise, whether literal or symbolic, is a universal thread connecting generations across centuries. Imagine, once more, standing at the highest terrace, looking outward across the ancient city. The sun glints off the Euphrates, painting shimmering reflections onto stone channels and water basins. Birds glide from branch to branch, their soft calls echoing in the air. Flowers of every color bloom, filling the terraces with fragrance and movement. The gentle murmur of water flowing down cascading channels invites you to pause, to breathe, and to become fully present in the suspended world around you. Each detail, stone, soil, plant, and water, is a testament to human vision, to the patience of Labour's, and to the delicate interplay between engineering and artistry. Even as centuries have passed, and as historians debate whether these gardens truly existed, their legend continues to flourish. The mystery itself becomes part of their magic, allowing the mind to wander freely through terraces of imagination. Some envision terraces stretching endlessly into the sky, overflowing with greenery and life. Others picture a more intimate garden, modest yet lush, tucked behind palace walls, offering a private refuge from the bustling city below. Whether imagined or remembered, the gardens invite reflection, calm, and inspiration, offering a gentle reminder that not all wonders need to be fully tangible to be transformative. Consider the countless visitors, ambassadors, and travelers who gazed upon the gardens centuries ago. Their awe, their delight, and their descriptions helped to preserve the gardens in memory and story. For them, the terraces were not merely architectural achievements, they were a testament to the power of human imagination, devotion, and artistry. The act of witnessing, recording, and sharing their impressions carried the gardens far beyond the city of Babylon, ensuring that their image would echo through the annals of history, inspiring writers, artists, architects, and dreamers for millennia. The hanging gardens also remind us of the human longing for harmony and balance. In a world where chaos often seems overwhelming, the gardens exemplified order, patience, and careful cultivation. Water flowed deliberately through channels, plants were chosen and arranged with intention, and terraces were layered with both practicality and beauty in mind. In this, there is a lesson for modern life. By approaching our own environments, relationships, and ambitions with mindfulness, care, and creativity, we can cultivate spaces, physical, mental, and emotional, that foster calm, clarity, and growth. The garden's cultural legacy reaches beyond the ancient world, inspiring works of art, literature, and architecture even today. Painters imagine their cascading terraces, writers describe their beauty in vivid prose, and architects draw upon their design principles to create modern vertical gardens and green spaces. Virtual reconstructions and digital simulations allow us to wander through the terraces, hear the soft flow of water, and feel the presence of trees and flowers in ways that make the gardens come alive once more. Each interpretation, whether historical, artistic, or technological, honors the spirit of the hanging gardens, keeping their essence vibrant and accessible for new generations. At the same time, the gardens embody the interplay between imagination and reality. Archaeologists and historians debate their exact location and even their existence, yet the power of the gardens endures precisely because of this uncertainty. Their legend encourages the mind to wander, to envision what might have been, and to marvel at the possibilities of human achievement. In this way, the gardens exist both in history and in the imagination, bridging the tangible and the intangible, the known and the dreamed, creating a space where curiosity and wonder flourish without limits. There is also a profound sense of peace in the story of the hanging gardens. In imagining their terraces, we find ourselves in a sanctuary, away from the noise of the city, the stress of daily life, and the pressures of time. Water trickles in gentle streams, birds call softly from branches, and the air is filled with fragrance and movement. This imagined experience mirrors the principles of mindfulness and relaxation, being present, observing small details, and allowing the rhythm of nature to calm and center the mind. The gardens become a place of quiet reflection, a mental refuge, and a gentle companion for sleep or meditation. The hanging gardens further teach us about resilience and adaptation. Flourishing in an arid environment required ingenuity, observation, and constant care. This serves as a metaphor for life itself. Beauty and growth often require patience, problem-solving, and persistence, even in challenging conditions. The terraces, water channels, and careful plantings remind us that careful attention and thoughtful effort can transform even the harshest environments into spaces of abundance and calm. This lesson resonates deeply in our own lives, where mindfulness, dedication, and creativity allow us to cultivate peace and growth amidst the complexities of modern life. As night falls over the imagined terraces, the gardens invite us to slow down, to notice subtle details, the glimmer of water, the movement of leaves, the rustle of animals, and the scent of flowers carried on the breeze. Each moment in this suspended paradise is an opportunity to reflect, to rest, and to cultivate inner calm. The hanging gardens, real or imagined, offer a timeless meditation on beauty, balance, and human ingenuity. They whisper the promise that even in the midst of a busy, noisy world, there exist spaces, both external and internal, where we can find serenity, wonder, and quiet joy. Finally, the gardens leave us with a sense of continuity. From ancient Babylonian visitors to modern storytellers and dreamers, generations have been inspired by terraces of greenery, flowing water, and imaginative vision. Each person who envisions the gardens adds to their life, keeping them alive in memory, art, and imagination. They are a living legacy, suspended not only above the city but within the human heart, where curiosity, creativity, and the desire for peace continue to flourish. So as you drift toward sleep, picture the hanging gardens once more. Walk slowly along the terraces, feel the soft texture of stone underfoot, listen to water cascading in gentle streams, and inhale the imagined fragrance of blossoms and herbs. Let the rhythm of the terraces, the flow of water, the rustle of leaves, the quiet presence of life, guide your breath and calm your mind. Whether as history, myth, or meditation, the gardens serve as a sanctuary, a timeless reminder of the beauty that can arise when imagination, patience, and care meet. In this suspended world of greenery and water, you find not only peace and reflection but inspiration. The hanging gardens remind us that human creativity can transcend limitations, that beauty can thrive in unexpected places, and that moments of calm, observation, and wonder are treasures to be cultivated. They invite us to imagine, to dream, and to rest, allowing us to carry their magic into our sleep, our dreams, and even our waking lives. In their timeless presence, we discover that wonders of the world are not only monuments of the past but companions of the mind, whispering softly of balance, serenity, and the gentle art of living.